Candidates always tell us that the forthcoming election is going to be historic. But you know what? This one really is. I get emails every day from listeners who say, Michael, I'm concerned about the direction of our country. I want to get my friends and neighbors motivated and inspired, but I forget a lot of things that have happened. I wanted to put together something that could be viewed in one sitting and would either inform you or remind you of what the Democrats have done to your country over the last 2 years. Here goes. Remember the $787 billion stimulus bill paid for with a load of new Chinese debt? We were told we could spend our way to success, that this would jumpstart the economy. How does government spending on things like studying the effects of cocaine use on monkeys help our economy and generate jobs? Are we trying to help corner crack dealers expand their markets? Bad as they are, at least those pork barrel earmarks were in the U.S. There's significant money earmarked for Siberians to organize as community activists and lobby Russian bureaucrats on environmental issues. There are grants to study the effects of local populations on the environment in the Asian Himalayas. How will these stimulate the American economy? Obama promised an end to earmarks, and then he spent almost $1 trillion on them, more than any administration in history. The media called it a stimulus bill, but it was technically called the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009. How's that recovery gone for you? Over a year after the handouts to the friends and backers of Democrats, in June of this year, the White House announced we were entering the summer of recovery. That summer has seen unemployment increase, home prices fall, Americans raiding their 401ks just to pay their bills, and confidence at an all-time low. The only growth this drunken sailor spending stimulated was in our national debt. As Ronald Reagan famously said, to say that these guys are spending like drunken sailors is an insult to drunken sailors. At least drunken sailors are spending their own money. The only growth that was stimulated by this massive pork project was in our national debt, which increased 23% to $13 trillion. There were more stimulus programs, more handouts. It became so common we've lost track of it all. We'd never seen anything like it before. Since everybody knew these silly redistributions didn't stimulate our economy, Democrats began to refer to it as a jobs bill. Since they couldn't claim any new jobs were created, the Obama administration invented a new term, jobs saved. Don't worry about the fact that not a single economist had ever heard of a job saved, and there exists no quantifiable way to calculate a job saved. No worries, the Obama administration just invents new words and new definitions to further their ugly agenda. They claimed that 3 million people owed their jobs to Obama, even though those jobs existed back when Obama was still organizing with Acorn on the south side of Chicago. Thank you, O benevolent dictator, for allowing me to keep my job. All praise is due to you. The bailouts and handouts never stopped, as Obama got his hands on new treasure troves like the $700 billion TARP, which went to places like Maxine Waters' husband's bank, to cash for clunkers, to teachers' unions at local schools in states that spent too much on welfare and not enough on education. This was a redistribution from low government service states to welfare states, from red states to blue states, from Republican states to those who supported Obama. And it was another favor to his union supporters, all the while proudly proclaiming that this is all just for the children. Saul Alinsky would be so proud. As I say this, Obama is asking for another $50 billion for road building. Is our economy in the tank because we don't have pretty roads? Obamacare. Dubbed as health care for all, it's the most massive redistribution of wealth in American history. Why are 16,000 new IRS tax collectors needed in a bill for health care? It imposes burdensome new requirements of paperwork, cost, and compliance. 60% of Americans want it repealed. What happened already in less than 2 years under Obama? Private pay shrank while the ranks of government employees grew, and fast. More people than ever are working for the government, leaving fewer of us to pay their salaries. More people than ever are receiving government benefits, with fewer of us to pay for them. The private sector is losing jobs, but the public sector is growing in size and scope. Webster's dictionary defines socialism as, quote, an economic and political theory advocating collective or governmental ownership and administration of the means of production and distribution of goods. So, let's see. We have more Americans working for or living off the government increasing its role in healthcare, taking over General Motors and the student loan industry, and more, the president directing companies to fire their CEOs and deciding when profits can be made.
There will be time for them to make profits, and there will be time for them to get bonuses. Now's not that time.
But don't call it socialism, because that would make you a racist. What else have we seen in the first 20 months of Obamanation? Housing prices have plummeted, making it hard to get equity out of a home or to move to another city to find a job. Obama's dangerous greeny-weeny agenda threatens to destroy industries, killing jobs, hurting our economy. Cap and trade passed the House but couldn't get past the Senate when Democrats saw they'd lose even more seats, but it's coiled and ready to strike if Democrats hold a majority in November. The sky is falling and the earth is burning, and Al Gore said so, and he would know.
The planet has a fever. If your baby has a fever, you go to the doctor.
Obama's leftist supporters want you out of your car, and they want to prevent American companies from drilling. Never one to let a crisis go to waste, BP's industrial accident became BO's justification for destroying the Gulf Coast oil industry. Obama's moratorium on offshore drilling was instituted with no relation to safety or the environment, and therefore was shot down by 2 different courts. It's not based in science, it's in politics, and it's a key part of his political agenda. The effect of this bone he's throwing to his leftist friends, the Greenies, is hurting the Gulf Coast economy, harming investors, hurting our ability to provide for our own energy, and making us more reliant on nations that finance and harbor terrorists against us. Nobody in America gains from this moratorium, except maybe George Soros, who stands to get rich by it. Illegal immigration, terrorizing many states, kidnappings, cop killings, shootouts, violence in states like Texas and Arizona that's out of control. When Arizona took action because the feds wouldn't, our tax dollars were spent to sue that state. Obama and his cronies criticized the bill for weeks, claiming it was racist and unconstitutional, and then had to admit they hadn't even read it.
I have not had a chance to. I've glanced at it. I have not read it.
Mexico has seen 28,000 people killed in just a few years, many of them cops, judges, and elected officials, in broad daylight as a drug war is building. The foot soldiers and field generals are setting up shop in America with a wide open border, and violence here is on the rise. Parts of our country can't even be protected. The government puts up signs to warn us, yet Obama and the Democrats refuse to allow Arizona to deal with it responsibly. Americans were frustrated with this radical agenda and rushed process of profligate spending, so they formed into grassroots groups. One of them was the Tea Party, which brought out thousands of Americans to protest. The Tea Party was the lead story on every news broadcast for over a month leading up to May 15th of last year. But President Obama said he was unaware of the Tea Parties. Instead, he trotted off to Egypt to vow to defend Islam against anyone who might criticize it. Then, the Tea Party was dismissed as astroturfers, not grassroots, who were paid by companies because they dressed too nice to be real protesters. When they couldn't be ignored or dismissed, the strategy turned to fear. Surely this Tea Party would erupt into violence. The media repeatedly claimed that we were on the verge of violence because Americans were upset and joining Tea Parties. In fact, we did see violence and intimidation from the left, from Black Panthers menacingly stalking voting locations, which Obama refused to prosecute, to eco-terrorists threatening the very earth they claim to defend. With the Tea Parties obviously too big to ignore, clearly authentic, and not prone to violence, there was but one ace card. From the NAACP to the White House, to their friends in the media, the drumbeat was consistent and grew louder. The Tea Party is racist. Ah, yes, racism. It works every time, except this time it didn't. There are so many other troubling aspects of the Obama presidency, but so little time to cover them all. We were sold the post-racial president, but we got the most racial president. Identity politics have reached a crescendo. Racism is now the standard speaking point for any Democrat, since they are unwilling and unable to discuss public policy on the merits of their points. Then there's Obama's insensitivity for the victims of 9/11 and his support for the mosque builders near the site. The new NASA administrator said that he was told by Obama that his job was, quote, "Perhaps foremost, Obama wanted me to find a way to reach out to the Muslim world and engage much more with dominantly Muslim nations to help them feel good about their historic contribution to science, math, and engineering."
Okay,
I wish I had time to discuss the Sestak potential bribery case, the lavish vacations, the constant golf, the real reasons he's not allowed to give up the teleprompter.
If he doesn't get rid of that damn teleprompter, it's like an eye test. He's just reading words now.
The more than 30 czars he has appointed to avoid his own Senate's approval and our public investigation. People like Van Jones, an admitted communist who was appointed the czar of green jobs but had to resign when people found out that he was Bill Ayers without the bombs. Or Mark Lloyd, the FCC diversity czar, who has professed his admiration for Hugo Chavez and his incredible democratic revolution. Not just his czars, but his cabinet are frightening too, like Anita Dunn, his communications director.
And then the third lesson and tip actually come from two of my favorite political philosophers, Mao Zedong and Mother Teresa, the two people that I turn to most.
I wish I had time for the transparency and ethics lies, like promising C-SPAN hearings on health care and to post every bill on a website 5 days before signing it. He lied. Obama loves to increase our taxes, but his own cabinet doesn't pay theirs, including his Treasury Secretary, of all people, who hadn't paid his taxes for several years. You're known by the company you keep, and Obama's most frequent visitor to the White House is Andy Stern of the thuggish SEIU, the very organization that pinned the 15-year-old child of a mid-level corporate executive in his home with thousands of protesters while the kid's parents weren't even home.
We're trying to use the power of persuasion. And if that doesn't work, we're going to use the persuasion of power, because there are governments and there are opportunities to change laws that affect these companies. I'm not naive. We're ready to strike.
That's Andy Stern, the head of the SEIU, who quotes Karl Marx liberally.
Been working with unions around the world, and what we're working towards is building a global organization, because workers of the world unite. It's not just a slogan anymore. It's a way we're going to have to do our work.
And sounds like Obama back when he was caught on camera talking to Joe the plumber.
There are opportunities in America to share better in the wealth, to rebalance the power, and unions and government are part of the solution.
President Obama has already enacted parts of his radical agenda on America in just 20 months. He couldn't have done it without a large majority in the House and the Senate. He cannot continue to trot on our freedoms if Democrats lose the House and the Senate. So let's focus on what is at stake between now and November 2nd. If your congressman or senator or governor is a Democrat, they have to go. Here's why. Remember, you can't vote out Barack Obama during this election, but you can stop him by voting out your congressman or senator if they're a Democrat. No matter how much you like your individual congressman, or if you met them at a ribbon cutting, they smiled at you, or how long they've served, or they're really nice people, consider these important facts. Congress is made up of the House and the Senate. Appointments, appropriation, bills, and much more. Go through them. They have incredible power. Let's take them one by one. The House. Currently, there are 255 Democrats in the House with 178 Republicans and 2 vacancies. Republicans need to add 40 seats to win a majority of the House. The House is dominated by the Speaker, and the Speaker is elected by a majority of the House membership. The Speaker is the most powerful person in America who is not elected by the public. The Speaker is incredibly powerful. If Republicans win the House, Nancy Pelosi loses her job. Democrats would lose the chairmanship of committees, and they would lose their ability to pass bills like Obamacare and cap and trade. Nancy Pelosi would go back to being just another congressman, one of 435, with no influence and no power. Currently, she is incredibly powerful as Speaker of the House. She would lose it all. Nancy Pelosi was elected Speaker of the House in January of 2007. During the last 2 years of Bush's presidency, Democrats control the House, not Republicans. Democrats also control the Senate. Nothing could get done unless the Democrats approved it since January of 2007. Imagine this for a moment. 36 years ago, the Speaker of the House became the President of the United States when the VP and then the President resigned. If Biden and Obama were unable to finish their terms for any reason, Nancy Pelosi would be our president. Nancy Pelosi has no experience in the private sector, not one day. Just like Harry Reid, Joe Biden, and Barack Obama, and the Secretary of the Treasury, Timothy Geithner. When questioned about Obamacare's 2,000 pages of new rules and taxes on our lives, she responded,
"But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it."
During the stimulus debate, she warned a nation of just over 300 million people that
we do not have an economic recovery package. 500 million Americans lose their jobs.